Hello, everybody. It's Max with Crypto Talk now. Quant, of course, attended Sibos recently, and if anything, there's 5 key elements that we definitely want to share with you guys in regards to what was really, really significant with this particular interview that a particular individual had with the likes of Gilbert Verdian, CEO of Quant, and especially what you're about to hear from Martin Hargreaves, the Chief Product Officer from Quant. That is one of the most key things I want to outline for you guys, because once you hear this in this particular interview, if anything, you could draw your own conclusion about what is happening as we speak with this whole thing of the central banks getting on board with ISO 222, and especially when it comes to the global payments system, that upgrade, and what that entails and the significance behind it. So without further ado, I've gone ahead and fast forwarded to some key parts that I basically want to outline for you. And of course, for the purposes of this video, I wasn't able, of course, to full screen this, so I'm going to try to blow up as much as I can. I won't be in the frame. I'm going to pause it on key areas that I want to bring to your attention. So let's go ahead and get into today's quant coverage. So here's the start of this, and like it mentions right here, this is, of course, their guide to Sibos 2022, and of course these 5 key themes: interoperability, DLT, institutional digital assets, tokenized money, and of course central bank digital currencies. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play this, and of course I'm going to pause it when we get to some of these key areas to do a little bit of discussion.
To sit down and reflect on everything that we learnt and heard this week, but perhaps more importantly, to look to the future, to the next 12 months for this industry. Guys, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Hello. Hello.
I thought we'd start our conversation in the very same place that we started our guide to Sibos that we wrote before the event. So we identified 5 key themes in that guide, and I thought we could perhaps start with the first of those themes, which is distributed ledger technology. I just want to read to you what we wrote as our big take from that guide, just to refresh your memory. So we wrote at the time, DLT will eventually replace much of the current infrastructure because it's inherently more efficient, agile, and secure. And I'm just wondering, from your discussions during Sibos Week, how in sync do you think we are with the broader industry?
I think from the actual opening plenary, where the chairman of Sibos and the CEO of Sibos opened, and front of mind, it was all about central bank digital currencies, interoperability, and DLTs. And what's changed is the market's maturity in terms of understanding what the technology can do for them, but also real world uses. And we didn't know it was going to be that critical to the members of the Sibos and the Swift community. But right from the beginning, it is, and everyone we pretty much spoke to had the same appreciation of what it can do and kind of a need to do something with CBDCs and DLT.
Yeah. Martin, was that your reflection?
Yeah, it was interesting actually, because I mean we have quite a strong payments background. At Sibos there was a lot of securities people, and pretty much everybody we spoke to was either going live or about to go live with a DLT based securities platform. So the large banks, the vendors, they were all, this quarter, next quarter, they seem to be really on the cusp of tokenizing just a load in that industry. I think payments are kind of rattling on behind. So the next 12 to 24 months will be really interesting on the payment scene, but I think securities it's happening now.
Well, I'm
saying that securities is happening now, and if anything, you just literally heard Martin Hargreaves mention that key thing. For instance, the next 12 months especially, right? And that's one of the things I wanted to share with you guys, especially, if you think about what's going on with ISO 222, especially here at CTN, we of course had that ongoing series referring to preparing for November with ISO 222. And of course that was delayed to March, for instance. But when you hear some of the actual talk with these people who attended Sibos and the connections they made there with the likes of Swift and so on. And then, of course, some of what Martin basically mentioned with these particular banks. I mean, we're talking about literally central banks, right, of Europe and so on. And seeing, for instance, I don't know if you guys happen to follow our XRP coverage that we do on our live show, right? I even broke it down, and I highly recommend this, even if you're not a fan of XRP. Check out one of the last videos we did on XRP, where it talks about how ISO 222 will pump XRP. If anything, it will give you a broader perspective of how significant all this is when it comes to, this particular bank, is doing a maintenance upgrade, on this particular date. What date? November 19th. And there was literally a grocery list of different banks doing this specific thing. And I'm not the only one talking about this. Like, of course, you'll see in that particular video, there's other content creators that are covering, for instance, Crypto Lulu. He happens to be a British content creator who really follows the likes of what's going on with, this particular bank and that particular bank and so on. He literally does in-depth investigative reporting, if you will, on that type of activity. And to hear this from the likes of, for instance, Martin Hargreaves in this sit-down interview with CMO Andrew Carrier to reflect on, of course, like it mentions, these key themes, I think it's absolutely just massive. Because if anything, it gives you, again, more of a broader perspective on where the money is going, literally, right? And if anything, like I mentioned before, this is how crypto in itself gets to this mass adoption. It's taking on the utility of what these banks basically need, the technologies to drive that force. So we're going to hear a little bit more in regards to this, and of course, we'll come back in just a moment.
I'm glad you mentioned securities, because I completely agree with you. And the note that I made, I attended the T+1 settlement session, and there was a chap there who's head of security services at SIX, Javier Hernani, and he was certainly, so I thought, the most fervent advocate of DLT adoption. He actually said, if T+1 is more than 5 years away, why don't we do it on fully digital, i.e. he meant on DLT, invest in the next technology, not the existing one, that could take us to T+0.
All right, so just briefly, another thing I want to mention is, that is a great question. If T+1 is more than 5 years away, why don't we just, do it fully digital? Invest in the technology, not the next technology, I should say, not the existing one. That could take to T+0. And if anything, my key takeaway is if they can accomplish this, like we're about to hear, in the 5 years instead of 15, that is massive in itself. And again, this is how I personally believe that we're going to achieve some of these great, huge market caps, not with just the likes of Quant and so on. This will affect the overall global market cap. It's what people who are not exposed to the likes of Quant and some of these other ISO projects and so on, let's face it, products, don't quite understand, because they might have only been into the likes of this particular crypto project or that particular one, or the ones that have no utility. The ones that have the true utility, in my opinion, they're going to create that massive amount of market cap, are the ones that are tied into the financial sector, especially the financial sectors, because if anything, that's where the cross-border payments come from. And on top of that, you're literally having not just trillions, but in some cases, maybe even quadrillions of money being basically, transferred country to country, as the saying goes, cross-border. So let's hear a little bit more from this. You're going to hear, of course, some more commentary from Gilbert, and then, of course, we're going to have some more news for you guys that just recently happened in regards to Quant. So here we go.
Everything is instant now. We're sitting here in a legacy industry. I thought that was very, very telling. But then the real sort of crux of it came a bit later on when they did an audience poll in that session. And 80% of the Cybos audience said that they either wanted T+0 or real time as their preferred settlement cycle. Do you see the industry reacting to that and adopting DLT and getting us there? Is that inevitable?
We've only just come out of T+3, and that was the norm for decades, and that was a huge achievement to reach that milestone. I think what has changed is consumer behavior and expectations. We're an instant society. We want everything now, and we're used to getting payments in real time, content in real time, and food in real time almost. So
I just want to add another thing to what Gilbert basically mentioned. We are the now society. On a recent video that we did in regards to Quant and so on, we literally live in that now society. Think about mobile banking in itself. That is the now society. The times of going into your local branch and so on, unless it's absolutely necessary, right, to provide, proof of who you are, and for instance, that there was some kind of thing that happened to your account and so on. I can understand the local bank basically saying, you know what, you have to physically come in and whatnot, right? Prove yourself, show your identification, so on and so forth. But yes, we do live in the now society. And with that said, when you look at the likes of, for instance, not just Quant, you could technically say, Ripple's XRP and so on. Like the example made before, you have Ashton Kutcher on Ellen's show, for instance, Ellen DeGeneres. And, it was a few years ago, of course, before the whole thing that happened with the SEC lawsuit against Ripple. But he was able to send Ellen DeGeneres $4 million, like literally within, 6 seconds, right? That is what we're talking about here. That is the now society. If anything, it puts that much pressure on traditional finance, right? TeFi, if you will, right? So now all this pressure happening and literally seeing the things that we mentioned earlier in this video with the likes of all these different banks and so on that are basically, doing the maintenance for these upgrades. Yes, we understand that, some of them, they're just going to just wait until the last minute. I guess you could say procrastinate to a sense in March and whatnot. But to see all this come into full fruition and if anything, it creates that much more of the supply and demand for the likes of not just Quant, but some of these other ones, right? Ripple, Stellar Lumens, you name it. You kind of get an idea, especially with what Gilbert Verdian is outlining here. So just a little bit more in regards to this, and of course we're going to show you guys some more extended coverage in regards to some of the news highlights. So we'll be right back.
I think the market has evolved to expect instant real-time settlement of securities, but having the same compliance and the processes occur in the background, but in a faster and a better way. It's very difficult to put that on a legacy stack because of the complexity of how it's all architected and structured. It's a lot easier if you coexist and take your legacy stack, complement it with a DLT equivalent, and then start migrating those processes to a T+0 instant settlement system. What's exciting is taking that and linking it and marrying it to payments, and having tokenized money settle tokenized securities is the holy grail.
Yes, and that came up again and again during Cybos Week, isn't it? You need the tokenized money to go with the tokenized settlement. Okay, well, look, let's move on to the second topic, because they're sort of very closely linked, of course.
And from there, in regards to that second topic, we'll get basically back to that on another Quant video. So, if anything, I'm definitely looking forward to, of course, having you guys here to listen to that. But basically, of course, I want to show you a little bit more news. I want to reflect on that last keynote that was basically mentioned. And if anything, the significance of digital assets, the tokenization of just that. Earlier today on our live show, by the way, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, on Crypto Talk Now, we were talking about one of the recent things that happened with, for instance, Ripple's, the tokenization of real estate, for instance, and what that entails and so on. By the way, if you happen to be a person who follows, Ripple's XRP and so on, check out that particular video that is going to be uploaded here soon as well. So Without further ado, let's go ahead and, of course, kicking into some of this news I have for you guys in regards to some other new news when it comes to Quant. So I'm going to pull this back, and if anything, check this out. This is something else. So shout out to Greg Lunt, who I saw also report this, and so on. I saw quite a few other people report this, but of course I follow Greg Lunt. Shout out to him. Highly advise you guys give him a follow, especially if you use Twitter, because he does great reporting on the likes of Quant and so on. But anyway, like it says, Breaking Quant has partnered with UST Global. And again, I wanted to make sure that I said UST Global. I'm not referring to, Tether's UST, the former unstable stable coin, right? No, not the same thing. So it says a technology consulting firm with 30,000 employees and 80 offices in 30 plus countries. And by the way, I don't see it listed here, but they also do about 1 billion in revenue. It says the partnership will help financial institutions in UST Global's network issue CBDCs, commercial stablecoins, and digital securities on just that Quant's operating system, as in Overledger. That's why we always make that reference of Quant is the Microsoft of crypto. It literally is. It might even be even more than that when it's all said and done. So there's a little bit more in regards to this, and of course I want to share with you guys some key areas on just that. So of course, some of the highlights that he basically posted here, their particular industries, right? In regards to UST Global. So it says, for instance, is a deep domain of expertise. They at UST Global help customize our approach. It says we rely on years of experience across specific industry verticals to ensure our solutions are tailor-made for your organization. Specifically, financial services. Again, like that's going to be a huge one, right? And healthcare. Think about those two industries in itself, right? We always talk about market capitalization and so on. Those two things in itself, when you talk about especially like GDP, if you think about the healthcare industry and financial services alone, that equals up to the GDP of some foreign countries, like all of it, if you think about it. I mean, it's just massive. But anyway, there's retail and CPG, manufacturing, technology, media, and telecom, of course, the public sector and semiconductor. This whole thing with UST Global is massive for Quant. And you think about some of the things that are mentioned, the likes of Gilbert Verdian and who they teamed up with and so on. And that's, again, it's just the tip of the iceberg. That doesn't even count all the other partnerships they have and everything else they got going on and so on. So I definitely want to bring that to your attention and also highlight a few key things here on this particular article straight from UST.com in regards to Quant. Now, like it mentions right here, it says Quant and UST partner to, of course, accelerate the adoption of institutional digital assets across financial services. And this is something that you're going to see happen quite a bit. And of course, if you see the specific date, November 22nd, basically, the night wrapped up a few hours ago and so on. But nonetheless, by the time you see this particular video, we might be very well into the next day. This is really still hot, fresh off the press, if you will. I'm, of course, going to highlight a few key areas here. I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but here is the main thing I want to show you guys, for instance. So, for instance, it says right here, these services specifically will help financial institutions adopt digital assets as they increasingly realize the benefits of distributed ledger technologies by issuing digital money and tokenizing existing asset classes for greater settlement speed and access to just that, new markets and, of course, clients. Now, in regards to Quant, it says Quant will provide the foundational technology and UST Global will provide support through user interface design and integration via its sandbox based in their London Innovation Lab. On top of that, the partnership facilitates the issuance of CBDCs and also digital money in the form of commercial stablecoins and digital securities, kind of like what Martin Hargreaves mentioned in that particular interview. On top of that, it says this will happen in the form of the major distributed ledger networks. And of course, by doing so, this will work with the two firms, financial institutions, which can, of course, shorten the life cycle of their blockchain projects just by a few weeks. In regards to Quant, Quant is going to utilize what's referred to as low-code APIs to issue highly secure and externally validated digital assets and tokenized currencies. Again, part of its utility that they bring to the table to make this all happen. Its Overledger gateway enables business flows used by banks for accounts. And again, I get asked this quite a bit when it comes to the likes of Quant. What exactly do they do? Well, literally, this explains it right there verbatim for you. So, and then on top of that, of course, there's payments and settlement. You can basically plug into exchanges and venues for asset management. Just another great thing that Quant does. Now, a little bit more in regards to this before I wrap up today's particular video on Quant. But look at this. It says the global tokenization market was valued at $2 billion in 2021. Now, this is crucial. It says compounding growth of 24% is expected over the next 8 years. Top of that, according to Grand View Research, it says additionally, CBDC pods are now taking place worldwide, which will unlock new capabilities for governments, businesses, and consumers. Now, that's what I wanted to mention. When you think about these pilot programs, and I think that's, if anything, some people, especially new to crypto and so on, and especially when it comes to the likes of Quant and whatnot, they don't quite understand how some of these pilot programs work. They have to, kind of like, any type of pilot, if you think about it, even in television, right? They have to see how this is adopted. They have to see, for instance, what type of audience this has, literally, right? In television, I know this is apples and oranges comparison, but just hear me out for you to have a broader perspective, if you will. So a television show shows, for instance, that pilot. And depending on how well that's received, they will take it on. And of course, there's the adoption. There's an audience for it. The same exists, for instance, to a sense, when it comes to, like, for instance, CBDC pilots and so on. It has to be tested. It has to be tried out. And if anything, then the adoption kicks in. But one key thing I want to mention to you guys is this. When all of these pilots, not necessarily all of them, but when a lot of these different banks kick in these pilot programs, they no longer become pilot programs where they actually are fully implemented. And then, of course, fully adopted. That will create that much more demand for the likes of Quant. So I think it's just absolutely huge. And of course, like it mentions, it will unlock new capabilities for governments. Wow, governments. Think about that sector in itself. Businesses and, of course, consumers. Today, listen to this, more than 50 countries are in advanced phase of exploration for CBDCs, and 19 of the G20 countries are considering a digital currency. Now, I get it. There is a crowd of people who watch, for instance, the coverage of Quant, not just through myself, let's face it, other content creators that you follow and so on. And there's a lot of doom and gloom about CBDCs, and rightfully so. I totally get it in regards to that. But I just want to state this. Listen to what Gilbert Verdian has outlined before, especially if you've been following us here at CTN for a while. He basically said in an interview, it is not the case of having CBDCs replace our monetary system completely. If anything, it is designed to complement the current monetary system. And that is one of the key takeaways I think more and more people need to understand. It's not necessarily trying to make this as a giant conspiracy of the New World Order and so on. And I get it, You'll see, for instance, President Biden use that type of language and so on. And I'm not trying to make this political. I'm a very, middle of the road type of guy. But what I'm saying is people will take these snippets of specific interviews and so on and say basically, you know what? He said the New World Order. And this particular content creator and so on, while I like a lot of these content creators, they'll say things like this and they'll take these key areas and if anything, they'll spin it in a way so what's being projected out is, oh man, this is doom and gloom. This is the end of the world, CBDCs and so on. So you may be the type of person who feels that way and so on. And I will just say this, that's where I respectively agree to disagree. I firmly believe, just like what Gilbert mentioned, It is designed specifically to complement the system, to improve the current system. And if anything, like I mentioned, that will create that much more demand for the likes of Quant and some of these other ones, especially Ripple's XRP, Stellar Lumens XLM, and so on, to create those type of technologies that will make this all interconnect, if you will. I'm going to read two more of these quotes because I don't want to read the rest of it on the bottom of the page and so on. And I know that this particular video is kind of getting a little bit longer than it should. If anything, listen to this next two parts. Key thing from Gilbert Verdian, of course, the CEO of Quant. He said, for instance, UST Global has been at the forefront of blockchain services for almost a decade, and their customer focus is aligned with our approach, them as in Quant. The partnership will ensure that financial institutions can create new business opportunities and innovate with new DLT embedded products and services to tokenize existing asset classes. Look at the broader perspective here. Many banks want to tokenize digital assets. They're basically in a position where they feel like they have to keep up with what's referred to as the now generation. We do live in this now generation, right? So they're keeping up with being innovative. And then on top of that, you hear this particular comment from Daniel Field, the global head of blockchain from UST Global. He said specifically, quote, "We have partnered with Quant because of the flexibility and agility inherent in its technology." When I hear that immediately, I'm literally thinking of kind of like what Gilbert mentioned in the past, especially been following our coverage here, and that is, it's not about Quant telling these particular blockchain projects, well, you guys are going to have to spend so much time per day or per week and so on trying to change your blockchain to fit into the needs of us. No, that is not the message at all. Quant, if anything, sends out that message and already has that reputation established because they have a completed product in which they basically say, you know what, Quant will be interoperable with you. But all we need is to have that partnership. We'll do the heavy lifting. You focus on your utility. That's the beautiful thing about this. So on top of that, like it says, built with financial institutions in mind, Quant's Overledger API gateway is the perfect foundation to bring the benefits of blockchain to a multitude of businesses in this sector. And again, guys, the API gateway is just one small aspect. Is it really a small? I mean, it is pretty big, but it's just one branch, if you will, of the many branches that Quant is able to pound home and deliver. So if anything, guys, wrapping the video up, look at this. Quant is sitting at $110.92. I get the whole thing about these crazy volatile times that we're in, lots of doom and gloom and so on. The overall crypto market has improved roughly about 80 billion since the other day. It's a 5.95% increase, and I get it. Like people said, Bitcoin could crash down to 11K, 12K, and so on. I'm not denying any of those possibilities, but if anything, I'm recognizing what's going on in the market, and I'm recognizing what's going on with the innovators. They're providing the technology for the now generation. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight at CTN with our particular Quant coverage. Stay tuned for the next episode of what is going on some of these 5 parts from Sibos in regards to Quant. It's been a pleasure to be able to bring you guys these news updates in regards to Quant. Like, comment, and subscribe, and please hit that bell notification if you haven't done so already. And by all means, if you love to listen to live crypto news updates and coverage, check us out daily, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific for Crypto Talk Now. On behalf of myself and the rest of the CTN team, may you all have a blessed day, and we'll see you on the next one.